I wear all of my watches. They may sleep in the bank, but watches are made to be worn. That's what they're there for.
Exactly. I love that.
And you know, people are really enthused about cars, high performance cars, but how often can you put a car through its paces as intended? Right. These watches can be worn every day, 24 hours a day, for 100 years and still do what they are meant to do. That to me is miraculous.
Today we have the distinct pleasure of sitting down with Mitch Katz. He's been an avid collector for over 25 years. He's the author of Time on My Hands, A Collector's Journey in the World of Watches. And we have 10 pieces here, many more featured in the book, but 10 pieces here that you have never seen before. And one interesting thing I've noticed, I want to kick it off with this. I don't see any Patek Philippe, I don't see any Cartier, and I don't see any Rolex. Why is that?
Don't get me wrong. The brands are very well respected. I have had conversations with watchmakers, and they're very complimentary about Rolex. Patek Philippe, everybody knows. But those brands just didn't talk to me. I collect what appeals to me. And if it doesn't appeal to me, I'm not going to spend my money on something just because it's the popular brand, or because I should have it. I respect the brands for what they are. I respect all watches. But for me, it didn't mean and speak to me. For me, this is very personal. I do this for myself, what brings me joy.
Yeah.
This is what I have boiled down my collecting to. The watches, the relationship with people, the relationships with the watchmakers.
And I think that personal drive and that intuition has led you to some interesting places. And I want to get into it. Let's start with this JLC Reverso here, but it's not your typical Reverso.
Far from it. It is a very, very unique piece. One of the things I've enjoyed about this collecting journey is I've made a lot of friends.
Yeah.
And they have been part of my journey both as instigators and as collaborators, if you will. But we were at lunch and a friend of mine who had a similar taste as I mentioned the Reverso 101. So I called this person I worked with at JLC. I said, any chances you could find one? And she said, well, there are very few, and it's been out for a while. I'll see what I can do. And miraculously, long story short, it showed up. The 101 movement is the smallest mechanical movement ever made.
Yeah, this was typically featured in like the ladies' cocktail watch.
Exactly. They embedded this movement in a sapphire case, and they made two models, I believe, three of each, which were diamond encrusted. I'm not a diamond person. It really was a
You don't seem like it, yeah.
And then they made five with this design, which is absolutely amazing. The watch works perfectly. The challenge is trying to wind it and to set it.
Run me through that.
There's a crown right here,
Yep.
but it's not attached to anything. But what you have to do is you have to unwind the crown,
Okay.
then flip it over and attach the crown to this nub right here. And that's where you wind it, then pull it.
Because the movement is essentially suspended in the middle of the case.
Exactly.
So there's no winding stem cutting through the visual part.
Exactly. This scares me because I am so worried I'm going to lose the crown.
Right.
So there are certain watches I have that challenge me. And this is one of them because I don't wind it and set it over a sink. I mean, I'm usually standing back over a carpet so that if perchance I should drop the crown, I won't.
It's not down the drain.
Exactly. But it's a beautiful watch. It wears big.
Yeah.
But it is something that is rare and it's fun.
And this is not only the smallest movement in the world, but it's hand engraved too.
Yes. Now the movement, if you look under a loop, the movement is actually engraved.
This is stunning. And there's a what looks like a mother of pearl
Yes.
minute track along here. And then, of course, you have an Art Deco motif in the background visible through the sapphire case.
Exactly.
This is such a high concept piece for something that was already pretty architecturally magnificent, let's say. So just a densely good watch, and what a way to start, huh? I like that you mentioned the crown coming off and things like that. We have a watch later that was dropped on the floor. We'll get to that
Yes.
in due time. From here, I want to move on to the Zodiac Astrographic, which is a very funky, very 1970s watch. This is, of course, a very 1920s, speaking to the period, and this is all out 70s. I actually had a modern limited edition of this for quite a while, and it got so many compliments. It's so fun, and one of the fun things is the mystery dial here that we have.
Yeah, and that's what attracted me on this watch. There are several other brands, JLC being one of them, Cartier being another one, that have mystery dials.
Yes.
This is very affordable. I saw it and said, I want that complication. There's a whole range in the world of watches, from the least expensive to the most expensive, that can give joy. And the price is not the determinant.
Right.
It's the fun, the pleasure, the joy that you get from whatever watch you are selecting.
Now, innovation is a big theme in your collecting philosophy and the watches that we have here. What's the key innovation for this Tag Heuer micro timer?
Tag announced that they were going to do a special series of accurate chronographs. So they started with the micrograph, which is a watch that measures time in 1/100ths of a second. This is the micro timer. When the micrograph came out, I said, oh, that's a cool idea. I'm going to get the micrograph, the micro timer, which is 1/1000
Yes.
seconds.
10 times more, yes.
Right? All mechanically. So I got the micrograph. This took a year to find, and miraculously it showed up, and there are many stories how that came about.
I imagine they didn't make too many of these.
My understanding was this won a GPHG award.
Yes.
And to be part of that, they had to make 11 pieces. I don't know if they ever made all 11. This is number one.
This is number one of 11 at most.
At most, correct. Now this watch has two separate movements. One for time, it's beating at 2880, but it has a separate escapement that is beating at 3.6 million vibrations per hour.
And I understand the power reserve is 3.5 minutes, maybe?
When you're running the chronograph, yes. And the power reserve for time is good.
Sure.
It's 40 hours or whatever. And
but when you're going hypersonic, you run out of fuel pretty fast, I would.
Yeah, and I asked somebody, I said, why would it be so short? And he said, well, if you're measuring something in thousandths of a second,
Yeah.
they're not going very far. You don't need to have that degree of accuracy. I said, okay. But it chews up power really fast. But when you turn it on, it whirls. Turn it on. This is just crazy.
Wow. 3.6 million vibrations per hour, huh?
Yes.
Astounding.
It's crazy.
I've never seen anything like this, Mitch. So Tag Heuer is a brand that's known for their chronographs. One brand that doesn't get enough credit for their chronographs, or really enough credit in general, is JLC. And what do we have over here?
What we have is the first released model of the Duometro line. I was fortunate to be part of a dinner with Jerome Lambert when he was head of JLC. He has since returned to JLC, I'm happy to say. But at the time, it was when he was previewing the Gyro Tourbillon 2. At the same time, they were releasing this new model, a Duometro, which has two different power reserves, one for the time and one for, in this situation, the chronograph.
Yep, their dual wing system.
Exactly. The Reverso Gyro 2 went around the table, looked at it, went, yeah, okay, handed it back. But when the Duometro came off of his wrist, it went around the table and I just glommed onto it. It sat there right in front of me the whole dinner. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't give it back to him. I couldn't release it. It was magic. The movement for a brand, a major brand, was beautifully finished, much higher level than their standard production models. And it's like love at first sight.
You didn't have to intellectually convince yourself that you wanted this watch. You had this like gut feeling that you had to have it.
The technology, the beauty. And then when I saw this model, this was the limited edition yellow gold. The dial is this antique white finishing. It was,
It's very soft.
yeah, it was kismet. The white is very in your face. It's a white dial. This is soft, subtle. It really did mean or say to me vintage.
Yes.
In a very modern fashion.
It's not that computer paper white.
Exactly. And as it's turned out, the functionality of these watches is incredible. They are, to the second, perfect in their timing. They're so attractive. They got me so hooked in. I kind of went down the rabbit hole with these and have obtained a few other ones, but they all function as advertised. Perfect timing, magnificent finishing, excellent functions, and really user-friendly.
I mean, this is precise in many senses of the words. There's a lot going on here, but it feels cohesive as it is busy, and even just the case back here is spectacular.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, it really shows you what JLC is capable of, and they get overlooked a lot, and I think that's unwarranted because when you see something like this, when you see, I mean, the Reversal 101, just the range of pieces they're able to do and the technical expertise is beyond. Before we met, you sent me a list of the watches in your collection, and I would say there are two brands that are represented more than the others. One is JLC. The other is Ulysse Nardin. Now, there are a lot we could have chose from. I made you narrow down to only one. What is it about the Sonata GMT that attracted you to it?
It's technologically the best, in my opinion, alarm watch on the market. It is a phenomenal travel watch because it has the GMT function. And the alarm is unlike any other alarm watch.
How so?
The alarm watches, most of the alarm watches buzz.
Yep.
Right? They buzz for about 10 seconds. This has a chime. And actually, the gong in this alarm watch is the same gong that's in a minute repeater.
Okay, yeah, so definitely an upmarket feature, let's say.
Exactly. And
Better than a buzz.
much better than a buzz because it actually will chime for a guaranteed minimum of a minute. And the sound is so resonant, it's beautiful. Not only can you set the time for the alarm, not only does it have a countdown function,
Okay.
but when you change time zones, the alarm changes with you.
Yeah.
So when I flew back east, I had a 10 o'clock appointment on Pacific time. When I'm changing the GMT function just by push buttons,
Yep.
the alarm reset to 1 p.m.
Brilliant.
No other watch
Which
does
is a
this.
headache for a lot of, to have uncoupled complications like that. You know?
Right. It's all coupled. This is phenomenal.
And you can also adjust the date forwards and backwards for it, which is not something you see a whole lot of. You think it would be more simple than it is, but it's really quite rare.
Exactly.
And which is the fifth most impressive thing about this watch, but I had to mention it. So when a lot of people think of Vacheron, they think of the overseas. They don't necessarily think of this watch here, which is the Vacheron Copernicus, accurate for the next 8,000 years, is that correct?
Something like that order.
Yeah.
I have several watches in my collection that are going to keep me alive for a long time, a really long time. Because somebody has to take the responsibility to check out their claims. Their claims are done by computers and by math and all that. But how do we know that's true?
Yeah, right.
If you say that this watch is accurate for 8,000 years, somebody's got to check it, right? I mean, it's my responsibility. Yeah. I'm taking it on. I'm taking one for the team.
That's what they're banking on, is no one's going to be around.
There you go.
Well, speaking of staying alive, this one also had a near-death experience. I don't want to bring up a painful memory, but this one took a tumble on a ceramic tile floor. Is that correct?
Yes, it did. First of all, this watch is not your average Vacheron. So they only made 20 of these. So, you just can't go to the store and buy another one.
Yeah.
I'm very careful with my watches. They're very important to me, and
You wear them, but you're careful with them at the same time. Yeah.
You know, want to have nice things, you have to take the responsibility. One morning, I was getting up, getting ready to wear or to go to work, and I chose to wear this watch. It was a day that I was probably going to be in my office and just doing work on the computer, not going around doing very active things because I didn't want to bang the watch. And so I'm go downstairs and I have to set the watch. And so in this watch, the way this watch works, you have the central sun.
Yep.
Then you have the Earth that rotates around the sun in 365 days.
Okay.
And then
So
the
hours, minutes, and then a year-long function.
And then it also the Earth itself rotates every 24 hours. So it's rotating as it rotates. And you set the Earth into what astrological house you are currently in. So I typically set the time by my most accurate timepiece, a $20 clock from Amazon. But I needed to know what astrological sign. You cannot wear a watch with the wrong time. It drives me crazy. You have a complicated watch with all these indicators, and no one sets them. You know, the perpetual that says it's Thursday, October 17th, 2013. I mean, no, set the watch. Come on, man. That's what it's there for. So I go downstairs. I want to get my phone to figure out what zodiac sign we're in so I can properly set the watch.
Yeah.
I lost control of the phone. My hand slipped. I don't know, but that watch just took a tumble and landed face down on the tile floor. Pain, sunken feeling, broken heart. I had just brought this home. It wasn't in my possession for very long.
Yeah, I've been there before. I think some of our viewers have been there before. It's taking that to another level with this watch.
And it's like, I couldn't bring it back. I had to have my wife take it back because I didn't want to suffer the slings and the arrows of the staff there when they saw what I had done.
Yeah, it's a painful interaction.
Oh, this is my responsibility. This is my baby now. Yeah. But all worked out. It was fixed. No problem. No harm, no foul.
I will say there is a dark irony to a planetary watch being the victim of gravity.
Never thought of it that way. That is an excellent description. I'll have to remember that one.
A dark irony, let's say.
The dark irony.
Bad coincidence. From there, we move on to another engraved watch that is actually how you and I got connected.
Exactly.
Through our friend Aaron Bazarkanian, and this is the Havid Nagan. It's featuring a barley corn guilloche dial and a Schwartz ATN movement. And if I understand correctly, you first saw this watch at a dog park, is that right?
I was out with my grandson in a park. I get a text from Aaron saying, I'm releasing this new watch. And he sends me this text of this picture. And I texted him, I said, I cannot see it. Not because the picture's bad, but I'm in the bright sun. And when I got home then, it's like, whoa, this is a pretty crazy dial. And I didn't totally appreciate the movement and the work that was done on the movement, but there was something special about this watch. As it turns out, he and his wife walk their dog in a specific dog park, which happens to be the same dog park we would walk our dog in.
Yep.
And there we were in the dog park. Our dogs are running around, and he brought this watch, and it was, wow. At that point, now seeing this dial in the bright sunshine and the glimmering and the glistening, it was magic, absolute magic. And at that point, I got to see the movement and the shaping of the case.
Yeah, this curved profile is great and comfortable as well.
It absolutely is something you can put on and I actually almost forget you have it on because it fits so perfectly. It's not about the lugs, it's about the shaping of the case. And the movement is exceptionally well finished for what it is. I think he did an excellent job designing this watch.
And what I liked about this, and we were talking about this before, the camera started rolling, the industry is a lot of people lifting up other people. You've helped him out with this watch. He's been a big supporter of the book as well, and it's just a beautiful thing to see. And I think that brings us really nicely into our next watch, which is an individual watchmaker that you've developed a personal relationship. This is Marco Lang, formerly of Langenheim, and has now started his own brand. And let me tell you, this thing is exceptional.
Being the product of 5 generations of watchmakers,
Wow.
he had no other option but to set up his own shop.
Yeah, it's
And
in his blood at that
exactly.
point. Yeah.
It's more than DNA. It is engraved in his being
Yeah.
to make watches. And I found out that he was making this limited series of 20 watches called the Zweissicht.
Yep.
German, not my first language or my 10th, but it's best I can do.
We all speak watches.
Right.
That's what matters.
And what's fascinating about this watch is it's actually a 2-sided watch. You have the dial, which is pretty standard in design, but exceptionally well finished
Yes.
and
Classical, but
executed.
yeah, precisely
Right.
executed. Yes.
And then if you turn it over, the movement is in full glory.
Yeah.
He is a master at finishing. Finishing is one of my major criteria now, especially for this level of watch.
Of course.
And it's all done by him. And there's another feature that he included on the option. In other words, you didn't have to get it, but it'd be crazy not to. And that is, opposite the crown, there's a device here, and it is for shock absorbing.
Okay.
If a watch has a shock to it,
Yep.
the movement can adjust because of that shock. And when you send it back to the watchmaker, they have to guess what defect or deviation has occurred. This is an indicator to the watchmaker what needs to be adjusted
Okay. So it's
to
like
bring it back into compliance.
so it's almost like a built-in crash report of what happened in the watch and what needs to be done to repair it.
Exactly. And what Marco has done is he has stated that the indicator and what to do about it and how to work with it is open sourced. So any watchmaker can go to his site and get the information and understand what this is telling them. He has developed something unique, but he's willing to share it.
Which is very rare in a competitive space.
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of secrecy. There are stories we've all heard, and then after you hear the story, you can't tell that.
Sure. I mean, especially in, the independent environment, you make a few pieces a year, you're fighting for likely a lot of the same clientele as your competitors and things like that. So to open it up is a vulnerability, perhaps. So from one independent watchmaker to the next, I'm going to talk about this McGonagall, which is a name I've heard for a while. We have a friend who's been on this channel, Victor Boyd, an Irish bar owner over in Brooklyn, who said one of his dream watches as an Irishman would be a McGonagall. How did this come into your life?
It started when I was contacted by a mutual friend, Tim Jackson, who was representing the McGonagall brothers at the time. And he suggested that I think about a watch called the Tuskar, which is a ground up watch that they were building, the brothers were building. New movement.
Yeah, made from scratch.
Right, exactly. It took several years, and ultimately I bought the watch. And it's been a joy to have. It is a magnificent piece. And it was one of the few watches I have bought sight unseen. I bought it on faith. People think of watchmaking and they think of Switzerland. But there were watchmakers all over the world.
Yes.
And I seem to be able to find them. So we made our plans when we went to Ireland to go visit John, who is currently living in Athlone, Ireland, which is dead center in the middle of the island. And I was in his atelier, which translates into his garage.
Yep.
Because most of these guys, that's where their workbench is.
Gets the job done.
Exactly. He said, well, I got this watch in the safe. And he brought it out. And I looked at it, and it went, there's the prince. I was just, and then he said, well, you want it? I said, yeah. He said, well, I can't give it to you. I said, why? He said, well, I'm going to Asia. I need to bring it. I need to show it around. And then I want to service it and make it right, to finish it and bring it back up to my specs. I said, fine. So it took months for me to ultimately get this. So this McGonagall tourbillon is the only tourbillon that actually has been touched and worked on by both brothers. Because they
Okay.
usually only one or the other would build the watch.
A dual effort, yeah.
And the funny part is this watch, I think the date is 2006, and it just so happens that is the same year that the Irish won the Ryder's Cup,
Right, yeah.
which the hotel we happened to be staying at when we were visiting John had all these pictures of that Ryder's Cup. So it's like, this is destiny. Not that I'm a golfer. I am not a golfer, but I thought it was just very
You love those
ironic.
coincidences.
Yeah.
And I love the little Irish touches on here. I mean, just the typography on the back
Yes.
of the, engraved into the movement and everything.
And that's
is-
engraved by their sister.
Oh, okay, wow. So this is a whole family
This
affair.
is a whole family affair. And the crown is Om, all the ancient Irish writing. If you look at their pillars or you go to their cemeteries, their written language is Om, and that's Om,
Wow. A lot of thought put into this piece.
very much so.
A lot of history and yeah, no kidding. I mean, details, details, details. Mitch, we've gone through 9 out of 10 watches, and it's only a fraction of what's featured in the book. And there's no other way to say it. We say something very special for last. What do we have here?
That is a piece, Series 2 by Roger Smith, but a very special one. There are certain watches where you look at and you say, where do you go from there? I mean, it's just everything.
Yeah.
The story behind this watch was I contacted Roger. I was relatively early in his career. Ultimately decided to get a Series 2 from him. But during that conversation, I actually said to him, I had the temerity to say to him, so do you think George has something in the back of his safe or cabinet or something? Something that, just may have fallen off the truck or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Okay, never hurt to ask.
I applaud you for the temerity.
Thank you. Soon after we came to an agreement on this and on their Series 2, I put a deposit down, and then he announced that he was going to release a series of Daniel's anniversary watches. And I called him up, and we had some conversations, and he was just so gracious to allow me to take the deposit from the Series 2 and move it to a Daniel's, which I ultimately received. I had the honor and pleasure of going to the Isle of Man, spending time with Roger, who I had known already.
Yeah.
He actually had stayed at our
And
house.
that is a unique privilege
Yeah, it
in and
really
of
is.
itself.
Really is. And I was sitting at lunch with Roger. I said, I still want one of yours. He said, what do you want? I said, I don't know. He said, well, I want a Series 2. He said, do you want a 38 or a 40 millimeter? I said, I don't know. What gold do you want? I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
He said, well, you're getting a yellow gold, get a rose gold. I said, okay. He said, I got an idea. I've been thinking and wanted to work with this guy who engraved shotguns. And he said, let me think about it. I'll get back to you. So time goes on. Then out of the blue, he sends me an email. Here's a picture of your dial. What?
Yeah.
And there's this white, dirty, engraved dial. I was unfinished. I was like, what are you sending me? I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And it was the engraved dial from the engraver.
This at a very early stage.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, you don't tell an artist what to do. You just have to have faith.
You trust,
Yeah, that's what this is all about. Ultimately, when the watch came, I actually went over to England to get it. It was like, oh my gosh, this thing is magnificent. And the engraving,
It's easy to get lost in.
absolutely. And what's nice is there's still also the guilloche in the subdials. And I wanted that as part of this because when we were on the Isle of Man, spent 45 minutes talking to Roger in his garage at the time. Most important 45 minutes of my watch collecting career.
Yeah, it's all coming down to this, huh?
My wife started talking to his technician who ran his CNC machine. And the guy took out a sheet of metal and he said, this is where it all starts. And for 45 minutes, he went through the process of making a watch with my wife. And when we walked out of the garage, My wife looked at me and said, now I understand why they cost so much money. And it was the best 45 minutes of my life.
Talk about a masterclass. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she got it. So everything about this watch is perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfection.
I mean, he makes 15 a year at most, you know?
Yes.
And you can really see the hours that are put in this. You need to be in isolation on a remote island to be able to execute something to this level. And it is beyond special. I mean, I'm nervous holding it, honestly, but it's,
Put it on.
I mean, this is why we get into this stuff, right?
I've been handed watches, the Daniels, this, and when I'm handed it, it's in a wrapper. And I look at it and I say, when I take it out of this wrapper, it is a used watch.
Yeah. There's a moment when you could, in some people's eyes, ruin it.
Exactly. And then I realized, what is this watch for? It is to be worn. That's the only reason it is in a being. And I put it on. And I say, I don't care what it did to the valuation.
Yeah.
It is a used watch now. I don't care because it is the source of joy. This is what it is made to do.
Mitch, this has been fun and profound all at once. If you haven't already, pick up a copy. Time on My Hands, A Collector's Journey in the World of Watches, and what a journey it's been.
And it's not over yet, unfortunately, in some people's eyes.
I look forward to reading part 2. Mitch Katz, Thomas Hendricks, thanks for watching.